Welcome to Vendetta Sports Media. This is Eight Sided Freaks, and today we have you don't know how much work Jerry and I just put in to get this episode up and off the ground. Technical issues on both ends. Jerry was having Wi-Fi problems. I was having computer problems while I'm on my phone, and I've got my computer to the right of me here, running the stream. So if you see me looking over to the right, it's because I'm running the stream on my computer to the right. The camera's not working. We went through all these technical problems, and then we go, all right, what are we talking about today? We've got UFC Denver coming up this weekend. There's about one fight worth talking about as we talk about fights from a preview perspective. And there's not much outside of that. There's some fun fights, but in terms of talking about them and previewing, there's not much to talk about. So we scrapped together some topics today. I think we came up with some good ideas.
Yeah.
We're going to start with UFC Denver. Then we're going to talk a little bit about Jiri Prochazka and Alex Pereira because a little bit more has come out with both of them since we last recorded. And then we're going to do some fantasy matchmaking for UFC 306 at the Sphere. We're going to give our thoughts on who we want to see on that card because that's the next UFC pay-per-view that we will see fight announcements for. So, Jerry, how are you feeling today? Leading into this star-studded episode we have of topics.
Hey, we've made it. We were meant to start 45 minutes ago, but here we are. Technical issues, gotta love that. But no matter what happens, we will come out with an episode for you guys every week. Whether it's we're both on our phones, computers are shutting down, we will find a way to get eight-sided freaks out every week. And in a week like this, James, where these fights are not a lot to talk about, we'll still find stuff to talk about. We love the UFC, so it's always easy to come up with some stuff.
That's right. It's easier when you actually enjoy what you're talking about. So let's start it off. UFC Denver, Rose Namajunas versus Tracy Cortez in the main event. All right, so this was originally supposed to be Maycee Barber versus Rose Namajunas. Maycee Barber pulls out, I believe 3 or 4 weeks ago, so it's been a decent amount, but Tracy Cortez steps in. It is technically short notice, but it's not ideal circumstances, considering you're fighting in Denver, and big talking point this week will be elevation. So first, what do you make of this opponent change for Rose going from Maycee Barber to Tracy Cortez? And what do you make of Tracy Cortez stepping in to take the fight in Denver against the former champ on relatively short notice?
I mean, I think this benefits Rose significantly. She fights out of Denver. She trains at the altitude, trains at the elevation, going off what you kind of brought up. Maycee Barber was from Colorado, so she's used to the elevation and fighting and training up there as well. Tracy Cortez, on the other side, she trains out of Phoenix. There's not much elevation in Phoenix, so I think this makes it a hell of a lot easier for Rose in that aspect. As we've seen in fights in the past, Salt Lake City especially, and some other ones where you are fighting at a little higher elevation, you notice it in fighters who, and I know it's not short notice, but it's still, you need time, I guess, to prepare yourself to go and fight in a climate like that. Denver being a mile high, I never noticed it, but it's something that I do see people who notice the altitude when you come from low level places like Arizona or any of the coasts. So big advantage to Rose. Not nearly as excited about this fight now as I was, but still should be a fun one.
Yeah, and for a little bit more context, the UFC has gone to Salt Lake City a lot, so I feel like that's what people think about most when they think about elevation is Salt Lake City. Denver is obviously the number one that people talk about in the U.S. in general because it's the highest point. But the UFC fans, Salt Lake City is the spot the UFC has gone multiple times with multiple pay-per-views in the last few years. So that's the city that's gotten a lot of attention in terms of elevation. And Denver's 1,000 feet higher in the air. They also went to Mexico City, which I think is 1,000 or maybe a little bit more than 1,000 feet higher than Salt Lake City, than Denver, excuse me. But I feel like on the Mexico City card, we had a lot of people who knew, like, all right, this is insane. I got to get there really early. When you're in this, like, middle ground, I feel that's, like, more oh, I'll work it out when I get there type of thing. Like, I feel like when the elevation is more extreme, people take it more serious. When you're in Salt Lake City or Denver, it's, you kind of run that risk of people not taking it as serious and then that affecting the performances more than it actually would at high elevation, if that makes sense from a preparation standpoint. But as far as the main event goes, back to the main event. Sounds like Tracy Cortez went to Denver as soon as she found out she'd be fighting for 5 rounds there. So I love that. I'm not sure that I don't know how much that is going to play into it. And what interests me from the Rose perspective is I don't think she has good cardio, or I don't know if good is the right word, but I don't think she has like elite cardio when she goes from Denver and then fights in Las Vegas, for example. When you see her in the later rounds and you see like a drop off when she's at the lower elevation. So I know she trains at elevation, but I'm interested to see what she looks like at elevation, considering we've seen a decline as she gets deeper into fights. In the Hebos fight, she looked much slower in the later rounds. So I'm interested to see how that affects her, even though she trains there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I mean, looking at her past fights, the highest elevation she's ever fought at, I want to say it's Kansas City. And Kansas City's not even that high because otherwise recently it's Vegas isn't very high. Paris, Phoenix, New York, Jacksonville, Abu Dhabi were the last ones. She's never fought in Colorado, never fought in Salt Lake, never fought in Mexico City. So it is going to be interesting to see how her cardio holds up in 5 rounds in a fight there. I'm thinking she's been training there, so maybe it is the reverse when she goes down to elevation is kind of feels more of a difference, and same way we'll see people potentially when they move up to elevation see a difference that way. But I think she'll be fine. I think now that you mentioned Tracy Cortez is up, it went straight to Denver to train up there. It's a big difference, and getting those extra couple weeks there will be massive for her.
Yeah. One last thing I want to bring up while we're talking about like location and training camp and stuff like that is that Rose trains out of Denver, but she's also her like coaching situation is not one that I'm like fond of. With all due respect to Pat Barry, or maybe I shouldn't even say with all due respect to Pat Barry, I don't think he's that good of a coach, right? He's only a coach because her and Rose are married, and do your own research on Rose and Pat's relationship. I won't break the news to you, but I don't feel like Rose is as good without Trevor Whitman. When she was training with Trevor Whitman, that's when we saw her best performances.
Yep.
Without Trevor Whitman in the corner, I haven't been as impressed with just Pat. And even at times when you had Trevor and Pat Barry in the same corner, their corner advice would often contrast with each other, and Trevor would be the one who was right, and Pat would be the one who was wrong. For example, in the Carla fight, Pat tells Rose, "Keep doing what we're doing." Trevor says, "Hey, we need to pick up the volume. We need to start landing more." Well, she listened to Pat, did what she kept doing, and lost the fight.
Yep.
Now, I guess it's good not to have the contrasting voices, but the contrasting voice that was the correct voice is gone out of that corner, which is really concerning to me. Yeah. And for Rose, I also don't like to move up to 125 pounds. I think she's a strawweight. I think she's going to be consistently the smaller fighter. In her last fight against Hebos, she was smaller than Hebos, and Hebos is someone who bounces back and forth between 115 and 125. If you just go look at Hebos's Tapology page and look at the weight class, it is not consistent at all between the two weight classes. That's one of my biggest problems with Hebos is she can't pick a weight class. And now Rose goes out there against Hebos, wins. However, at the same time, she's also the only win in the division is against a girl who barely fights in the division and also fights in the weight class lower. So I don't like the corner for Rose, and I don't like the weight class for Rose. Those are two things that concern me on her side of this fight.
Yeah, the weight class I have more of an issue with because, I mean, that's why I was curious to see her fight Maycee Barber. Nothing against Tracy Cortez. She's 11-1, ranked 13th in the world. But her fight with Maycee Barber would have shown where she really stands in this division. Her first fight moving up, she fought Manon Fiorot, lost the decision there. pretty convincingly. It was in France, so from what I remember, it was quite one-sided. But Macy Barber's the 4th-ranked fighter. Cortez is 13th. This is where I wanted to see Rose fight one of the elite fighters in this division to see if she really stands a chance of being in here. Otherwise, I would say, yeah, go back down to strawweights. You have history there. You've done really well there. But as I wonder if there was something behind the scenes of, okay, we're losing the belts. We're not having a great performance after the, oh man, why am I blanking? Carlos Esparza fight. Maybe it was just time for a change. I'm not a fan of it either, so I don't think it benefits her one bit. And I didn't realize that Trevor Whitman was out of her corner completely. That's a big shock because I agree with you. She was much better with him in her corner. I think he's a very good coach.
I agree. I think he's one of the best coaches in the game, and I don't know that he's. It's hard to rank coaches as well because you have different fighters, and you know he's coaching Gaethje and Rose, and like you got good fighters to work with. But the work he did with Gaethje was outstanding, and when you see a performance decline when he leaves Rose's corner, to me that's very telling for some of his skills as a coach. So I don't know the reason for that. I know he was like redoing his gym, and so maybe he's back in the corner now. But I haven't heard that yet. If he's back in the corner, then I'd be much higher on Rose, but I don't think he is. I tried to do some research, and I did not think he'd be back. One more thing I want to say here before we get on to who we think is winning this fight. The way you described Rose versus Macy, and it's a very good litmus test for where Rose is in this division. I agree with that. But I think you can flip that now, and I think this becomes a pretty good litmus test for Tracy. Because Tracy, in my opinion, is a prospect that I like. I think she's very good. I liked her last performance against Judah Vicious, one of the bigger 35ers in the division. And that's just like one of the smaller 35ers. So I think she deserved a big jump up in the rankings, and she's getting that. So I think the flip side of that equation makes this fight interesting if you look at it from Tracy is now the one who's getting tested to see how elite she is. I think it would have been a little bit more efficient for the division for the original fight to figure out where Macy and Rose are both at. But I do still think there's value in getting Tracy this opportunity as well.
Absolutely. And on the Tracy side of things, you're saying she fought a bigger fighter. There was a point where Tracy Cortez early in her UFC career was fighting at 135 in the bantamweight division. So she's gone down, so she still knows how to fight that bigger style and has fought those bigger ladies. So I think that's a big benefit for her in this fight. And might be something to keep an eye on, that she's used to or has been used to fighting bigger opponents, whereas Rose has been fighting smaller opponents. And it's that weird middle level of, I don't quite know how good either of these two are in this division because we only have a very small sample size for both.
Yep, I agree with the very last thing you said about the sample size. I think that's very true. All right, looking at the odds here, we've got this is pretty odds are pretty wide. And by wide, I mean different books. A lot of variation in the line is probably a better way to put this. Pretty common line out there on different books, we'll say, is plus 175 Cortez, minus 225 Namajunas. That's probably the most common line, but there's a lot of variation in that. Some have Cortez as a bigger or smaller underdog, depending on where you look. But 175 is the most common line right now. What do you make of this fight from a skills perspective, and who do you like to get this one done?
Skills wise, I'm still like I used to really enjoy watching Rose fight. I think it's been a little different the last couple ones since I saw the Carlos Esparza fight, especially. It's been less exciting. But she's fought everybody there was to fight in that strawweight division and won the belt twice, beat the best of the best. I still remember the head kick of Zhang Wei Li, so that was a hell of a knockout. She still has that power, or did, at the strawweight division. Curious to see how it translates over because she hasn't fought much in this division. I'm leaning towards her a bit just because I think her skill set overall is a little better than Tracy Cortez's, but this is a fight that I could really see go either way. It kind of just depends on who shows up, which version of Rose shows up, which version of Tracy shows up. if I had to bet anything, I would bet my life savings that this goes to a decision and we don't see a finish. Tracy Cortez has 2 finishes in her 11 wins. Rose has 7 of 12 wins are finishes, but moving up, it's a different game. So
Yeah, so I have a little bit of disagreement. When I look at this fight, I think it's very interesting because from a skills perspective, I'm not sure how good Rose is at 125 pounds, and I don't think she has as much pop in her hands at 125. Hebas has a notoriously bad chin, and she couldn't get Hebas out of there. Hebas ate a lot of shots, and she is one of the her chin at 125 pounds is not good, and she ate shots from Rose. And you contrast that with Tracy, who I don't know that she'll be able to put Tracy out. Maybe Tracy's chin is horrible, and we just haven't seen that yet. So I guess it's possible, but I'm just not sure how much damage Rose is gonna pack in her hands, especially in the later rounds. If she kicks her in the head a minute in, I mean, there's a good chance she knocks her out. But if we get to round 2 and 3 and 4, I'm not sure how much punch is going to be in those hands. And in the grappling, Rose has some good grappling moments. Wants to run from Carla Esparza because she was getting afraid of taking down. Shouldn't run from Carla Esparza because she was afraid of the punches. She ran from Carla Esparza because she didn't want to get grappled and taken down. And I don't know who's a better technical wrestler between Tracy Cortez and Carla Esparza, but I know that Tracy is much more physical, much bigger, and has good grappling skills of her own. So that leaves I want to pick Tracy in that regard. And in Tracy's last fight, she showed a lot of improvements with her hands. She couldn't grapple just Jasmine Judavicius, and Jasmine's not great, but 2 things she is a good grappler and big as shit for that weight class. Yeah. So Tracy said, this isn't the type of girl I can grapple for 3 rounds, so she went out there and outstruck her for 3 rounds. The best success Judavicius had was when she grabbed Tracy's hair and kicked her in the head. And she couldn't avoid the head kick because she was getting pulled by her hair. And then she got pulled. And one of the things that actually really sways me towards Tracy is her hair got pulled and she got kicked in the head. And then the next thing she did was start yelling at Judavicius in the octagon. And then the 2 sat in each other's face and started throwing down. And to me, Rose obviously doesn't have long hair, but hypothetically, if Rose were in that situation, I'm not sure that she's got the dog that Tracy does. Yeah. There's just a part of me in this fight that believes Tracy's going to be more physical and she's going to have more dog in her. And that's what's going to win her this fight is the physicality and being a dog and the willingness to sit in the pocket and throw. I think Tracy will take more risks. I think she'll be more aggressive. And from a trajectory standpoint, Tracy is the one moving up in the rankings and improving. We're seeing improvements in between fights. And Rose is the one moving weight classes and getting worse in between fights. So I'm taking Cortez. I could actually see her getting a finish. I think she hits pretty hard. She had Judavicius slightly wobbled a couple times. I think she could finish Namajunas on the feet or on the ground. So I like Tracy here. Obviously, things could go south because if Namajunas starts to flow and gets 1-2, circle off, and there's things Namajunas can do to win this fight. But I really like Tracy just for some of the things I listed: dog, willingness to fight, aggressiveness, stuff like that.
Yeah, the thing I do like, I agree with you, especially on that, was, yeah, you brought up that dog aspect. We saw Rose in a title fight kind of running around because she was scared to get taken down. If Tracy even starts faking, and not saying she's going to take her down, but if she starts faking takedowns, maybe Rose starts worrying about that. And Tracy's going to keep going forward, where that's where I kind of want to see Rose just buckle down and just start swinging, because all it takes at some level of this is one lucky punch on the chin and it's nights out for anybody. But I'm still going to lean Rose a little bit. I think the elevation will help a bit. And and part of it is, I guess, hopefulness that she gets back to the way she was in terms of her fighting style and being entertaining. But I can see exactly from what you're saying of Tracy Cortez kind of walking her down for 5 rounds.
Mm-hmm. And like you said, with the hopefulness of her getting back to her old ways, like I think it's a very inconsistent fighter in my opinion.
Yep.
Part of that inconsistency is you go out there and have a good fight. Like if she was just bad, it wouldn't be inconsistent because she'd be bad all the time. Part of inconsistent means you have great performances, and she's not incapable of doing that here. I do want to say that as well. That's the positive to being inconsistent is when you're having those good performances. So I don't think it's great to be inconsistent, but you got to be fair with it, and there are some good performances there.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Final thoughts on UFC Denver. Like I said, we're only talking about the main event because that ended up being a fairly long breakdown. There's a decent amount to break down with that fight. But looking at the rest of this card, what are some fights that stand out to you?
The one I'm probably the most excited for outside of the main event, or even maybe over, Drew Dober fighting Jean Silva. Drew Dober fights out of Denver as well, so he's used to all that stuff. He always seems to just have a fun fight. And then you look at Jean Silva, last fight out a few weeks ago at 303, last card we had, second round knockout of Charles Jourdain, and that was just a thing of beauty. He looked very good in that fight. Very excited for this one. I think it's going to be two guys who just kind of stand in there and just swing and bang at each other. See whose chin breaks first.
I agree with you. If I was forced to bet on what fight is going to be fight of the night, I would pretty easily pick that one. I've got a couple names I want to shout out here, so I'm not going to go long on any of these, but some names to shout out. Julian Erosa versus Christian Rodriguez. Mm-hmm. Rodriguez has racked off 3 wins in a row against legit prospects. He's got 4 wins in a row, but 3 of them against legit prospects in Raul Rosas Jr., Isaac Bulgarian, who is very, very good at wrestling, Bulgarian is, and Cameron Saima. You get 3 wins like that in a row, all right, it's time to start paying attention to C-Rod. So Christian Rodriguez is a name to watch. And then there is a section of the prelims that I would actually I would have this card ordered much differently, to be honest with you. But the last 3 prelims are all very, very good fights. Montel Jackson versus Damon Blackshear. Great fight. Montel Jackson is very talented, super long. Damon Blackshear can wrestle his ass off. That's a great fight. Jasmine Judavicius, Fatima Klein. Judavicius, like I said earlier, not great, but she is a dog. She fights hard. Fatima Klein, training partner of Aaron Blanchfield, sensational prospect. Deserves for there to be eyes on her first UFC fight. She can be very, very good in the UFC. This is a weight class up for, and as I mentioned earlier, Judavicius, one of the biggest fighters in the weight class, so it is a very, very tough matchup. But if you beat someone like Judavicius at 125 and then move down to 115, that signals some legit prospect stuff going on. So that's a fight to watch. And then the featured prelim, Josh Van, Charles Johnson. Charles Johnson, lots of volume, but Josh Van his boxing is legit. That's a sensational fight between 2 guys with great cardio at elevation. That's going to be a sensational fight. Those 3 fights are all 3 that I would consider moving to the main card.
Yeah, and there's one on the main card that I just want to bring up just because I have no idea what the UFC is doing with him. Opened up UFC 300 main card, opening up the UFC Denver main card. Cody Brundage fighting Abdul Razak Al Hassan. So Cody Brundage's last fight, he fights Bo Nickel, an upcoming prospect, younger guy. Now he's fighting a 38-year-old guy who's been around for a while. I have no idea what the UFC is doing with Cody Brundage at this point. I don't know if they're just throwing him out there just to fill space, which it kind of seems like they are. But it's just one of those weird ones that you fight this rising star, possible future champion, and the next fight you're fighting a guy who's been in 18 fights, fought in the UFC since God knows what, since 2016. It's one of those weird things that I just don't understand what's happening with him.
Yeah, and on the flip side of that, Piper's coming out, or Abdul Razak Al Hassan is coming off the Piper fight.
Yep.
So I'd have to look at it. Abdul probably has this spot in the UFC. I don't want to say locked up, But if he loses this fight, he's probably not getting cut. To me, for Cody Brundage, it feels like we can't cut you after we give you Bo Nickel, so we'll give you one more. And if you lose that, you're getting cut. That's kind of what it feels like to me. Those fights always low-key interest me when you know someone's going to get cut if they lose. I'm always like, there's something enjoyable from a viewing perspective knowing that's why they're fighting. But I'm not sure that one needs to be on the main card. So,
go ahead. Yeah, I was just going to say, just looking like at their fights and at their fight history, this one has the potential to be an entertaining fight. Hassan has all 12 wins coming from knockout. Cody Brundage, apart from a DQ 2 wins ago, his last 5 or 6 wins have been by finish. So could be. I don't know if it will be, but
yeah, this is either going to be finish, something hilarious that you never saw coming, or one of the worst fights you've ever seen in your life. It's going to be one of the three. That's why you watch the sport, for fights like that.
well,
Am I getting a sleeper? Am I going to laugh my ass off when I see what's happening in this fight? Or is someone just going to get baptized in the first round? All three are on the table. Wrapping up for UFC Denver. Next thing we've got on the docket is Jiri Prochazka moving down to 185 middleweight. We talked about this a little last week, but we wanted to bring this back up because Jiri didn't officially commit to a move to 185 pounds, but he did say that is something that's being discussed. And I believe his coach said that as well. So we talked about this last week because there were always rumors in the past that this was a possibility for Prochazka. And I believe it started after his shoulder surgery. I believe after that point, he maybe possibly lost some weight and could potentially make that 185-pound limit. But now it seems like last week we were speculating on rumors that we'd heard previously. Now it seems like that is a little bit more of a legit possibility. So what do you make of this from Jiri that he is open to the move to 185 pounds?
I mean, I think that opens us up to a lot of really fun fights, as we said last week. Anywhere in that whole really 8 and up range, there's numerous guys that I would love to see him fight at 185. Throw Hamzat in there as well. It just goes back to the question of would he be able to cut? He already has to do a decent-ish cut down to 205. Would he be able to cut even more to 185, and how would he look? If he can do the cut and everything, I'm sure his power would transition remarkably down there because he is a very powerful dude, but I wonder if his speed would be able to match up with some of these guys. I don't see him standing there and kind of jabbing and moving as well as the guys like Izzy Adesanya, Sean Strickland even. I know you don't like him, but he was moving quickly and all that. Vittori, not as quick, but Whitaker, any of those guys at the top are all still have power for the division and are relatively quick moving. Yuri's not the quickest in the light heavyweight division by any means. So going down, that's my big concern, but I'm open to the idea of him going down. I don't see him beating Alex at this point. Maybe if someone else gets the belt, but at the same time, I also wouldn't mind seeing a Jamal Hill fight with him or a Jan Blachowicz fight. So where I'm fine with whichever way Jiri goes.
Yeah. My concern, I agree with your speed concern. I think that's very valid. I would also be concerned with the chin. I'm very interested to see what Jiri's chin looks like in his next fight. That's true for a lot of guys who get knocked out. But a guy like Jiri, depends may be a strong word, but his chin is an important – the fact that he has an iron chin and is very durable is an important part of his game. And I'd be interested to see what a move down did, what a move down does, excuse me. Maybe that results in guys that don't hit as hard doesn't get knocked out at all. Or maybe it means, you're more dehydrated and you get knocked out more frequently, even if the guys aren't hitting as hard. So that's something that we can really never know until he fights. Maybe there's people behind the scenes who have information knowing how much he would cut, and maybe people at the UFC PI could predict something like that. But from our seats, where we're looking at this from, it's impossible for us to know. But that is the one thing that I would be very, very interested in learning about with Prochazka is how that chin looks not only after the knockout, but moving down a division. And like you said as well, some of these matchups just, I mean, him versus Whitaker, Imavov, Cannonier, Costa, like, yes, please. It's a great fight. Like, you can do that all day and list off great fights for him at 185 pounds. Side note, where's Marvin Vettori? I think someone needs to go check up on Marvin Vettori because we haven't seen him in an octagon in
a long time.
Yeah. His last fight, I believe, was Delete, and he has Delete fought twice. So I do think the flip side to Prochazka moving down is now you're looking at a light heavyweight division with the top fighters being Pereira, Magomed Ankalaev, Jamal Hill, Jan Blachowicz, Alexander Rakic, Nikita Krylov, Johnny Walker, Khalil Roundtree, Volkan Ozdemir, Carlos Ulberg, Anthony Smith. That would be your top 10. The light heavyweight division is thin, and I'm kind of concerned with how thin it would be without Prochazka. I think that is the flip side to making the middleweight division more fun. You are then looking at, what's going on with light heavyweight. So I do think that's one of my other concerns. But at the end of the day, if Prochazka wants to try at 185 pounds, I'm not going to be the one to stop him.
Yeah, and I mean, hey, they might be doing a trade in divisions. Roman Delitse now up to potentially staying up at light heavyweight. Jiri Prochazka going down. Doesn't seem like a balanced trade, but hey, it is what it is. And it also brings up, going off of that, when we talked about Delitse's last fight and his win over Anthony Smith and whether he should stay or go down, you look at the title picture. I think it's much easier for Jiri to warrant another title shot in the light heavyweight division against some of those guys than it would be for him to go to 185. And he would need probably a couple wins over these guys, and there's a long, long line. Whereas we don't know who the hell Pereira is going to fight next. Don't know if it's going to be Ankalaev. It seems like the UFC doesn't want him to fight. Don't know if it'll be a Jamal Hill rematch. There's a lot of space for Jiri to get another title shot in that division, much more so, in my opinion, than if in the middleweight one.
Yeah, I agree with that because right now there's a line looking to get to that middleweight belt. You've got to fight both now, and you've got Whitaker and Strickland both wanting to fight for that belt. That's going to change depending on who wins at UFC 305. But when you're looking at this light heavyweight division, let's say hypothetically they book Pereira and Ankalaev, who the hell's going to fight for the title after that? Like if it's tough to find a challenger now, who the hell fights for the title next? And if Jiri could work his way into a fight with Jamal Hill, and hypothetically he beats Jamal Hill, well, now all of a sudden you just took out the next guy, and Magomed is now fighting for the title. So you'd be competing with guys like Blachowicz, Rakic, Krylov, Walker, Roundtree. Like, it's not hard to get a title shot over those guys.
Not at all.
I think Roundtree could get an opportunity, but he has to go out there and win the fights to get the opportunity. So I think that's very possible. And another thing, the last thing I'll add on the light heavyweight title picture is what happens if Magomed beats Pereira.
Yeah.
Like, then you don't have to worry about fighting the guy you lost to twice for the belt. Then you'd be fighting a new name who would also need challengers. So I think that's also something to note, that it's not a guarantee that Pereira just holds that belt forever and prevents you from fighting for the title.
Oh, absolutely. It's going to be interesting to see because this has a lot of implications in both divisions of what can happen. But long story short, I'm excited. If he moves down, I'll be here for it. If he stays, even more so. So
yeah, I agree. And we can segue that right into some Alex Pereira comments that we had. Pereira claims he wanted to fight at UFC 305, or he wants to fight at 305. Do you think he's being serious with those? Or do you think this is a little troll attempt, considering the main event of that card is Israel Adesanya and Dricus du Plessis? Do you think that Pereira was do you think he's being serious when he's saying I want to fight at UFC 305, or do you think he's toying with his old rival Izzy a little bit with the fact that he may be added to the card?
I think it's a little bit of both. He seems like he's ready to fight anybody, anywhere. We saw it 300 kind of on not short notice, but he was it seemed like it was a lot closer to fight time than it was. Then he did do the 303 one on short notice as well. I wouldn't be surprised, but I do think it's a lot of the mental warfare with Izzy because imagine the scenes. I don't know who I mean, I would assume it'd be Ankalaev or maybe Jamal Hill or something like that. But the scenes of if they suddenly change that around and throw Alex Pereira as the main event, Izzy as the co-main, with Dresses Duplessis, the ego bump that would have for Izzy, he'd be fuming, I would think. I don't
Yeah,
think I don't think they would bump him. I think they'd have to put Alex as the co-main just because of where it is being held and all that. But he's already stealing the spotlight. Alex Pereira is, and I don't know. It would be very entertaining to see that press conference.
that would be that press conference is already going to be something crazy. And adding him up there would be that would be setting up one of those two guys to move up to 205. I feel like whether it be Drickus or whether it be Izzy, I feel like that's what that would be setting up. So I don't think it happens. I don't think it's even in consideration from the OC's perspective. I think there may be some. I think Alex may want to fight at 305. I think he knows that they won't give it to him. You know what I mean? Like, I think he understands the business enough to know they're not going to use him as a co-main to Izzy, or they're not going to use Izzy as a co-main to him. I think he's got a pretty good understanding of that. So I think he's just, I'll ask for it. In worst case scenario, they give it to me and I do it because I will. But I'm just going to get to toy with Izzy a little bit and get the fans riled up. And I think that's what he's doing. And credit to him, it had people talking, so it worked. I think it hit the goal that he was aiming for with that. So credit to him, but I don't foresee it actually happening.
No, I realistically looking at the UFC calendar, I think 307 is when we'll see Alex Pereira fight next. As of now, that's next Salt Lake City card, and the only fight that I've seen maybe was fully announced, maybe it was just rumored, was Raquel Pennington and Juliana Pena. That
better not be the main event.
Yeah. So I would not be surprised one bit if they throw Alex Pereira and someone as the main event for that card.
Yeah. And the UFC currently has a lot of fights they need to book as far as pay-per-view headliners. And it's kind of, I feel like right now we're not getting announcements because they're probably carving out how they want the end of the year to look. You have John Jones, Conor McGregor, Holloway Topuria. You have Sean O'Malley. All these champs, Islam Makhachev, all these champs need to fight. Certain guys have dates that we can assume. John, he seems pretty set on November at Madison Square Garden. The assumption is Islam Makhachev in Salt Lake City. And then from there, you can kind of build up the rest of those names. Maybe Leon or Bilal wants to fight again before the end of the year. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things you can do with the pay-per-view schedule right now.
Conor McGregor
will fight before. Throwing Alex in there before saying he'll fight before the end of the year, I think is a possibility as well. So, there's a lot of different options the UFC can go there. And once again, that leads us into our last topic for the show: some fantasy matchmaking. We don't do this often because, frankly, really don't have time in episodes. You really rarely get to throw on your, I don't know if fan cap is the right word, but it may be, and kind of talk about what you want to see, because usually we have 5 or 6 fights that just happened that we recap and talk about, but rarely do we sit down and go, all right, UFC 306 is taking place at the Sphere. Who do we want to see on the card? And that's what we're using our ending segment for today. The UFC 306 is the next pay-per-view that is not scheduled, without a main event and without any fights on the main card. I don't know if there's any fights booked for the actual event, but nothing main card, nothing major. So that gives us a clean slate to work with. We can start at the main event, obviously. And as I just said, there's a lot of unbooked champions right now that want to fight before the end of the year. And I imagine that I imagine pretty much any of them would be willing to fight at the Sphere. I feel like that's going to be a fan or a fighter desired card. So um, before you eject there actually are some fights booked. We've got 5 fights booked.
Mhm.
Best fight booked right now is Michel Pereira versus Anthony Hernandez.
That's gonna be a fun fight.
Yep, I agree. That may be a pay-per-view opener or maybe a second fight on a pay-per-view, maybe a prelim. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Everything else looks to be prelims with some Mexican prospects, and Arena Aldana is the next biggest name taking on Norma Dumont. That will also likely be a prelim based on previous Aldana fight card placements. So, main event. What's the fight you want to see at the top of the bill? And the struggle here is this is supposed to be a Mexican Independence Day card, and the only Mexican champion is Alexa Grasso. So,
With that being said, I do think you have to have Alexa Grasso and Valentina Shevchenko fight on this card. That takes one title shot away, one title position away, whether it's the main or I would assume co-main. But there's a world where I could see if they want to make the Sphere the greatest card ever and all that, 3 title fights. There's 3 I would like to see. You have obviously Shevchenko Grasso. Then since he's kind of been playing into the Mexican side of things, we've seen him wearing some sombreros, whatever the poncho kind of thing is. Merab Dvalishvili fighting Sean O'Malley. I would love to see that one at the Sphere. I think both of them would play great into that environment and all that stuff. Another one that I just want to see booked. I don't care when it is, where it is. It could be in a backyard behind, or it could be a parking lot behind a Walgreens for all I care. Max Holloway and Ilia Topuria. Those are the ones I really want to see, and I'm hoping we get at least one of those, if not 2 of them, from those 3 title fights. If we get all 3, I don't know exactly what date. 306. Oh, September 14th. I think I'm going to be sick that day from work. Definitely going to be sitting there watching if we get 3 title fights. But as far as the main, co-main, those are the ones I'm looking for.
Yes, and I'll start with the Alexa Grasso and Valentina Shevchenko. There's actually rumors that Valentina will not fight on that day. I think she's still upset about the last Mexican Independence Day debacle. Everyone likes to act like she got robbed, but that's one of the hardest fights to score ever. You had each fighter won 2 rounds clearly, and then you have a 4th round that is as close as it gets. Technically, you shouldn't be able to come up with a draw on the scorecards, but in my mind, you've got 2 fighters, each won 2 rounds, and then one you could have gave a 10-10 to. It was that close for a round. So I could really care less. But Valentina seems very upset about that, so it sounds like they may actually need someone else to fight Grasso if they want Grasso on that card, which Tracy Cortez, who's a Mexican-American, opens up some doors for her if she can get a win this weekend, possibly. So keep that in mind as well. But to your point about the main and co-main event, I think in an ideal world we get both of those. I'm not sure that we will. I'd be very interested to see what it would look like with a Max Holloway versus Ilia Topuria fight, considering Ilia Topuria is from Spain. I think that would be very interesting to see what the reaction would be to him headlining a Mexican Independence Day card. But at the same time, that's the best fight you can make in the sport. So you're kind of playing a catch-22 there, where maybe you don't want to give this Spaniard the headline of Mexican Independence Day, but if we're making it the best card we can, that's the best fight we can make. So tough situation there.
I'm just gonna play off that thought because I mean that crossed my mind a little bit, but imagine the scenes of Max Holloway on Mexican Independence Day coming out and finishing Ilia Topuria in front of a predominantly Mexican crowd celebrating their independence from Spain. The scenes would be electric.
It would be wild. I agree.
Even screw it. Sorry, Max. I know you deserve it. Yair Rodriguez, Ilia Topuria in the main event.
Unfortunately, I don't think that's a very winnable fight for Yair.
Yeah,
I think. But that is funny though. And then I also like the Sean and Merab fight. I want to get that fight booked.
Yep.
Is we're going to have the next title fight coming up relatively soon as well. So the sooner those guys can fight, the sooner we see the winner of Umar and Corey fight for the title. So get that one booked. And that's the next available date, so fine with me. Sean O'Malley has also been playing in to the Mexican heritage bit as well. He's doing it a little bit more in the lane of Chael Sonnen, where he has claimed Mexican heritage by way of having a Mexican child. So his logic was, I have a Mexican child. How am I not Mexican? We share the same DNA. Obviously joking, obviously some logic jumping from him, but he has leaned into it in a funny way there from Sean. So those both Sean and Rob have clearly made efforts and both looked at that UFC 306 as a possibility and have both made an effort to fight on that card, it looks like. So if we can get both those fights, like you said, I'd love it. Obviously, I'd prefer Max and Ilya because, like I said several times, it's the best fight in the sport. So I'd like to see that fight booked. But if we get Sean O'Malley and Murad Dvalishvili as the co-main, you will not hear a single complaint from me for making stacked UFC cards.
Yeah. I do have a question for two guys who were the only other former Mexican champions / interim champions in the business in the UFC. Do you think we see a Brandon Moreno or Yair Rodriguez fight at the Sphere card?
Let's start with Moreno because I would love to see a Moreno fight, but I don't know if Moreno wants to fight because he said he was going to take time off. But you see the UFC Mexican Independence Day at the Sphere and just get that spark. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel like this is something that if you were in Moreno's shoes, that would give you that spark to go compete. But also, he has carried Mexican MMA on his back for a period of time. Obviously, being the first champ born in Mexico, Cain Velasquez had Mexican. I believe he was Mexican American. Moreno, the first Mexican born. And he's kind of held that, and he had the pressure of the Mexico City main event. I would understand from a career perspective if he decided, I need to take this one off and just fight on a normal pay-per-view where there's not so much pressure on his back with that aspect. So I would understand if he doesn't, but at the same time, there's a chance that maybe he gets that spark and says, I really want to fight. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of with you. He's had the pressure of being the face of Mexican MMA for so long now. He's had the complete wars with Davison Figueiredo, knockout of Kai Kara France. I mean, losing a split decision in Mexico City in the first card back in Mexico in years, that's a lot of pressure. And I can see him doing exactly what you're saying and just take a little break, sit this one out. Maybe get on a pay-per-view card later on this year. I could see him being at the Madison Square Garden on that pay-per-view potentially, or the last one of the year. So, yeah. And I also just don't know who he would fight at this point. That's the other issue. Maybe in Amir Albazi, but Amir Albazi doesn't want to fight anybody. It doesn't matter who you are. He just doesn't want to fight anyone, it seems. And everyone else seems booked up.
I'll throw a Tetsuo Taira out there as a potential name.
That's
the opposite side of that is I think there's a chance they do a card in Asia or Japan this year, Japan specifically, just based off the rising talent in the region. And they signed Kai Asukara as well. So I think they may actually take a card over there, which would take Tetsuo off the table if they were saving him for that. But if not, I think that's a fight that would make logical sense.
And I say maybe do it then. Do it in Japan or wherever they end up going, because that would be a fun fight. Moreno's lost 2 straight. I think he needs a win over a rising guy to get another title, warrants another title shot. Perfect kind of thing. Go to someone's backyard and let's do it.
And that pressure would be different than what he's been experiencing as well.
Exactly.
It'd be the complete opposite, which may be a positive for him, which he beat Figueiredo in Brazil in one of their fights. So. And then there's the Yair side of things. I feel like Yair is like it's kind of like right. It's you got to have Yair on that card.
I think I think so. But who does he fight? Obviously, won't be Ilya or Max. I don't think it'll be Volk. cross out Ortega.
Yep. I think Ortega may fight on that card. That was another guy I was going to bring up for this year, but I believe it will be at 155 pounds.
Yeah, because I guess there's that whole thing of Dan Ige, Diego Lopez, and Brian Ortega in that. So maybe we see an Ortega or like a Diego Lopez or a Dan Ige fight Yair.
Yep.
Something. So
I think Lopez versus Rodriguez makes a ton of sense and is an outstanding fight. I could also, if we're trying to make this the best fight card of like best live experience of all time, you need entertainment. And in my mind, you toss as many 145-pound fights as you can on a card when you need entertainment. I wouldn't hate seeing Rodriguez, Lopez, and Ige all split up fighting different guys.
that's true.
I would like to see that and see all three of them. The way that I would approach that is Yair versus the winner of Arnold Allen versus Giga Chikadze. Cross your fingers, it's Arnold Allen, because Arnold Allen versus Yair Rodriguez is a fight that I have been slamming the table for repeatedly. And then I would look at Lopez versus Josh Emmett.
Oh, okay.
Ige versus, maybe he doesn't get a rank guy, but we can go with the Mexican Independence Day theme and give him, I believe Fernando Padilla is an unranked Mexican prospect. We can give him Padilla to get another Mexican prospect on the card, and you're also getting Ige on the card. And that's kind of what Ige has been doing, is fighting the prospect. So I think that may be the path to booking those three. That's kind of the way that I would approach that. And that gives you some prelims as well there.
Yeah, absolutely. There'd be some fun stuff if they all have different fights. Sure, we'd love to see some of them fight it out with each other, but seeing them fight different people and just this 145 division is a blast. So I'm here for whatever they feel like doing.
Yep. And then another name I just said, Ortega. Is there anyone at 155 that you'd like to see for Ortega at the Sphere?
155, I mean, we talked about it last week. The name that stands out more than anything else is Charles Oliveira. I would love to see that. It also sounds like Dustin Poirier is trying to get a fight soon, so maybe that, but I don't love that one stylistically at all. But it could be a little interesting, but who knows? We might get Poirier and Michael Chandler at the Sphere instead at the rate they're going at each other, or even Poirier, Nate Diaz, but I don't think that one would happen. But yeah, I'd be here for Ortega and Oliveira at the Sphere. I think that'd be a hell of a fight.
I think that's an outstanding fight, and I think that is one that, once again, you're trying to make it an entertaining fight card.
Yep.
Ding. That being said, I think Poirier is I disagree with what you said. I think that's an outstanding fight. I love that fight. It's Poirier boxing. Ortega won't stand down from a boxing matchup, but I know it just stopped. It's 2 fights in a row. Poirier has been rear naked choked. I mean, you throw him in there with Ortega, and now we got to deal with the rear naked chokes again. I think at a minimum that's interesting. So I would like that fight. I think that would be a fun one. I don't know that that's something Poirier would go for, but it's a name that he hasn't fought, and there isn't very many of them. So, and it's at the Sphere. So I think that would be a fun fight for him.
Oh, don't get me wrong. I think that would be an absolute blast of a fight. I was just more curious. Like, it is very much Dustin Poirier standing up in boxing, and Ortega, he'll take punches, he'll throw them, but trying to get down. And it's just that mix of styles that can lead to sometimes great fights, sometimes very boring fights. And that is
true.
But I think these two guys are entertaining enough that it doesn't matter.
Yeah, that is true.
I do have a quick question for you, just because I was looking at the UFC athletes, the active Mexican ones. Is Diego Lopez Mexican? Because I know he's Brazilian, but he's listed on there under the Mexico page.
I don't know if he has Mexican heritage, but he moved to Mexico and trains with Grasso.
Oh, that's right. Okay. That makes sense then.
Actively lives in Mexico.
Yeah,
so I don't know what the background is, but he is.
Yeah.
He represents both countries, but picks the Brazil flag because he was born there. I believe that is his background.
That's what it seems like. I just looked him up, and he fights out of Puebla. Puebla, Mexico. So.
Yep. Any other fighters? I think we covered all the big Mexican names and the big title fights. Are there any other fighters, or whether Mexican or not Mexican, that you would like to see on this Sphere card?
I think we've kind of covered all the ones I can think of. I'm sure there's someone else that we've let slip through the cracks, or just there's other fights that I would love to see. Doesn't matter who it is, but I think we have to save some of them for the other pay-per-views throughout the year.
That is true.
And the other fight nights as well.
What was that?
And the other fight nights as well, because looking at some of the fight nights coming up, it's actually doing really well at the moment after these next 2 weekends.
You're telling me you're not excited for not this upcoming weekend. You're not excited for next weekend's fight night card headlined by Amanda Lemos and Verna Jandiroba. That doesn't excite you. That doesn't just have you on the edge of your couch just sweating with anticipation.
I can't say it really does. It could be a very fun fight, but I mean, the whole card itself doesn't look good either. The whole card looks a little rough.
You tell me you don't like Brad Tavares co-main events, Jerry.
If it was in the land down under, maybe, but love me an Apex card, and this is the definition, in my opinion, of an Apex card.
I agree.
With that being said, you look at the ones after. And we got Corey Sandhagen and Umar. We have later on of Gilbert Burns and Sean Brady. That's criminal that's in the Apex.
Yep. And Kyle Nelson main event coming up later this year, which Kyle Nelson was fighting in the UFC main event, but here we are. But then again, he's fighting Cater. Cater deserves main events. Fighting on main events.
So it's one of those things.
It's a wild fight I never thought I'd see cross my radar. So
we're still waiting for the Paris main event to be announced, which
Benoit Saint Denis and Renato Moicano.
Oh, is that the main event? Okay, I saw that was announced. I didn't realize that was the main. I guess I was kind of waiting for Cyril Gahn to be announced, fighting a trash can.
Piece of news, and we completely forgot about it. That was the one piece of news that was worth talking about, and we forgot about it. But
I love that fight. I'm gonna just say that. That's gonna be a fun fight.
And I'm surprised Cyril Gahn isn't on the card, but it's a good fight for a main event. May not be the most top-ranked guys, but I think we get excitement there.
Yep.
All right. That wraps it up for Inside Freaks for today.
All right, look at us.
Thank you for.
We came in with very little to talk about, and we've still made it to an hour. So.
Yes, that is true. Thank you for sticking with us this week through a fight card that is not appealing to the masses, we'll just say. But we appreciate your viewership, and if you want more UFC Denver content, the preview will still be up on the website, Vendetta Sports Media, and Best Bets will also be up on the website, Vendetta Sports Media. So if you want more in-depth thoughts on the main card, you can find it on the website. But thank you for tuning in. Make sure you like and subscribe, and we will see you next week with another episode where we will figure out what to talk about. Hopefully they drop the Sphere main event. Try to do it. Otherwise, we're going to have to find some stuff like we did this week. So thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next week.